So, did you work on Oracle Cloud actually?
Yes. OCI.
So, okay. So, what was your experience in Oracle Cloud actually? What was the role?
Yeah, on-premises to migration to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, on databases in OCI. My production server last project in California, working with Golden Gate replication, and OCI was the cloud infrastructure. Yes, and this is the setup what I worked with OCI cloud.
So, was it an independent role or there was a team?
There is 6-member teams.
Okay.
I was
What was your role?
a team lead,
Mm-hmm.
and
So, did you do any hands-on?
yes, hands-on.
Okay.
Yes.
Setting up the Golden Gate environment?
Yes.
Okay. Was it a software as a service or in cloud?
As a service.
Okay. So did you work on any autonomous database?
No.
Okay. So any idea about autonomous database in the cloud?
Yes. In
Okay. Tell me
AWS.
about it.
Yes, in AWS, I worked in autonomous. The new coming is with autonomous databases. So I have knowledge on that.
Okay. So how many on what versions of Oracle you have worked and different operating systems actually? So do you have knowledge of installing databases from scratch?
Yes, I have. We will go with the operating system first. So I have Solaris admin as well as Microsoft admin. I have done MCSC, and migrations I had done with HP to Solaris environment long back, and cross-platform, and Linux to Linux many times, and for the new versions of Oracle. So 19C, I worked in migration. I done from 12C to 19C, and from the scratch setup. One of the client I worked multiple times in USA. So I work with Accenture in Cincinnati. There is a setup from scratches to the rack environment, and there is a reporting application was there. So set up that rack with the EBS, with the Oracle. Yes, and yes.
Okay. So can you briefly tell me the steps actually in 10 steps? How do you configure a rack environment?
Yes, first of all, we had to get that IP addresses, scan IP and virtual IPs, and DNS name from the sysadmins. Once we had taken, so we had to start our installation setup. So we had to go to that our in the setting up that rack environment. The first thing that we had to set that with the etc host file we had to go, and we had to set up that all that IP addresses, the first thing, and we had to give that public IP and private IP, virtual IP, and we had to set that on the node 1, and vice versa, and node 2, and we had to give that private IPs. And once we had to, if there is a network manager services, these are the things we have to do, and we have to grid the users is there. So we have to update that Oracle and grid user profiles on the node 1 and node 2, and yes, and then we have to for scan IP, we have to set that DNS setting on the node 1 and node 2 both, and in that resolve configuration file is there. So we have to set that in etc resolve conf. And we have to give that DNS name, and we have to set that scan IPs with what is the names we are using, and yes, and we have to test that with NS lookup. So these are the IP addresses has been set up, and now we have to go to the installation part. So in that installation part, grid control setup, the second part may come. So in that we have to set that grid environment on the node 1 and node 2. And once we set that, so there is a ASM. ASM is the Oracle storage management. It's a file system by the Oracle. I worked other file system also. Example, Veritas file system I worked, and volume manager I worked in Sun Solaris environment. So and RAID levels I worked RAID 0 to RAID 5. So this is the file system. Now the Oracle ASM is there. So we have to make that partition with the help of disk. And once we made that partition, we have to store all our databases. That storage is separate from that nodes, and on that there is a different types of storage is there. EMC, Power Path, NetApps I worked, and yes, in that Sun servers also I used. So there is separate the storage part is there. So all the things we had to copy and put into the ASM on the storage. Yes, and then we had to, there is a Linux environment, so we had to activate that kernels, and we had to ASM libs. These are the stamping we have to do. And once we done, so we have to add that users, Oracle and grid users. Once so it is there, so we can start the installation of database. So yes, and once there is a pop-up windows may come up, so we have to give that all the cluster name, scan name, and host name, and public virtual host name. These are the names we have to assign. And once we done, so it will be ready. Yes, yes, OCR and voting list we have to assign that, and that is storing the membership of that nodes, and voting is holding that all the registry file configuration information we can get it, and at regular intervals we have to take the backups of the OCR and voting disk. Yes. And yes, once it's done, so we can start with what we want to do. Yes, if 19C is there, so we have to install that CDB and PDBs. Yes, we have to log in with Oracle, and we have to give that shared disk if we have. So FRA we have. So these are the things we have to set up.
So, do you have a